begin, I'd like you to imagine something, okay? I'd like you to imagine riding on a beam of light. If you can imagine this, riding on a beam of light. And you are going at the same speed as all the other beams of light, in one direction. Now I'd like you to imagine, when you're riding on the beam of light, what all the other beams of light look like. Are they still? Are they like waves? Are they shooting off in all sorts of different directions? What's happening? Well, very famously, this is a thought experiment conducted by Albert Einstein, one of the more famous dyslexics in the world, possibly the world's cleverest human being, after you, obviously. And Albert Einstein performed this thought experiment, a visual thought experiment. And in fact, he not only was a self-confessed dyslexic, but he was a self-confessed visualizer. He moved university because the first university he was at didn't let him use visualization techniques. They wanted him to write everything down like a traditional university would. It turns out that visual thinking is the key to unlocking the potential of people with dyslexia. And we're going to unpack what we mean by visual thinking in a second. First, what I've done is I've divided it into 3 sections. As you can see, there's visualization, there's creativity, and there's structures. These are not different, they go hand in hand. Visualization, creativity, and structures. And we're going to look at each one of them as we go through this little talk, okay? Right, and I hope to become clear. First of all, visualization, simple visualization. What do we mean when we say that dyslexic people are visual people? Do we simply mean they don't like reading and writing, they like pictures? Well, kind of, but kind of not. There's something more going on. In 2018, 1,100 subjects were tested with this simple statement: when I view 3D spatial images in my mind, I can manipulate them and see them from multiple angles. If I can just explain very quickly, the lime green is strongly agree, the turquoise is definitely agree, the orange is yeah, I agree, the grey is not so much, and the blue is definitely not. On the left-hand side of this graph, we have the dyslexic respondents. On the right-hand side of the graph, we have the non-dyslexic respondents. It's a mirror image. Now, this isn't about whether non-dyslexic people can be visual. This is about a specific skill. Dyslexic people are able to visualize from multiple angles and manipulate these visual images. When we teach people with dyslexia, if we learn this, then we're entering the door to knowing how they really, really think. Now, you may think, oh my God, what do I do? How is this going to help me? How can I deal with this? Well, very, very simple. You might just want to ask some dyslexic people what it means to them. Or, you can look at this, because I've done it for you. Right? So, I've asked a lot of dyslexic people what it means. Let me read these out if I can. Visual aids, and more visual aids. Okay. Use different colour pens to keep the ideas straight, and use diagrams instead of written notes. My notes were all diagrams in different colours. And by the way, I'm a student. My notes are filled with different coloured diagrams. I'm dyslexic. Non-dyslexic people also find this useful, interestingly enough. This one, flashcards and flashcard quizzes. We use these for non-dyslexics. Let's use them all the time. When the teacher teaches from the book, use a highlighter and highlight the ideas and mark them with a flag. These are the things the teacher will usually test on anyway. But this isn't unusual. This isn't something that non-dyslexic people would struggle with, but it's something that dyslexic people need. We need images and mind maps. We'll come to mind maps later. We need images and mind maps relating to the subject. So then the dyslexic person can get an idea of what the mind maps are saying. highlighters. One for keywords, one for quotes, one for words to look up, and one for words that need practice. Again, colours, highlighters. Simple stuff. Really simple stuff. A lot of the time, dyslexic people feel slightly alienated in the classroom. We'll see why, but one of the ways of drawing them in is to use colours. Different colours help my daughter remember things better. Make it visual, graphs, mind maps again, coloured pens and pictures. These all help. We're seeing a pattern. Colours, graphs, mind maps. And finally, reading and writing is normal in class, but dyslexics learn better with seeing and listening. And finally, try to use books in the classroom that show lots of pictures and only a small amount of text. Pictures say 1,000 words and are easier to read. If you want to get through to the dyslexic brain, minimize the text, maximize the images. All the research says this, all the anecdotal evidence says this. Okay? Very, very simple stuff. If we're going to do that, here are 6 simple strategies for how to do that. Really, really simple. Number 1, colour. So we know that different things are highlighted in different colours. I'm a student, as I say, when I research, all my notes are written in blue ink. If there's a quotation, I write it in black ink. If there's a counter-argument or something really important, I write it in red ink. Okay, it's very simple. I only have to look at my notes and I can see the colours and I know what I'm looking at. Really, really simple stuff. Shape. When we use shapes to highlight certain ideas and certain images, it makes those ideas and images stand out such a lot better. As a very simple example, infographics are wonderful shape-filled images. Or you could have something that looks like a star to show that it's important. Or something that looks like a circle and say, look at this. Or something that says, don't do this. Big exclamation mark or something like that. Simple stuff like shapes. Connections. We draw connections, and you'll see a few examples of drawing connections as we go along. If you can draw connections, if you can show the connections between ideas visually, instead of just talking about them and hoping people remember them, then what you're doing is you're accessing the visual aspect of dyslexic learning. And it's not just dyslexic learning, almost everybody thinks like this. Hierarchy. Brilliant one. If you draw a pyramid, you know what's the top, you know the primary information, you can easily see the secondary information and the tertiary information, etc., etc., etc. If you can show hierarchies visually, then, you don't have to explain them. It reduces the need for writing. Very simple, really, and I'm going to show you a hierarchy sooner or later. We're also going to come back to the idea of primary and secondary information. This is really important. Perspective. One thing's closer than the other. You can have perspective of time, you can have perspective of space, you can have perspective of importance, you can have perspectives of relationships. It's not really that hard. All we have to do is when we're showing images, when we're using colours, we show perspective. If we show perspective, we show what's important. If we show what's important, people learn better. We're reducing the amount of written information. And finally, and this is something we'll see a little bit later as well, direction. You can show direction in your imagery. This leads to that. This is prior to that. This is more important than that. First this, then that. You can show direction. Direction of thought. Direction of drama. Direction of ideas. The way that things take shape. Well, okay. We're not going to dwell on this too much. What I'm going to do is, I've shown you 6 simple strategies. We're just going to come to 6 very simple shortcuts. Okay? Very, very simple shortcuts indeed. And I'll explain them very quickly. First of all, jigsaw learning. I don't know if many of you use jigsaw learning. Well, what you do is you have different cards, for instance, and these cards have got different ideas on them. Maybe one-word idea or something like that. And people put them together like they would a jigsaw puzzle to see how they fit together the best. It's a really, really useful way of teaching connections between ideas. Graphs. Everybody loves graphs. You can show information easily using graphs. I was a business person a few years ago, and I had to pitch competitively for an investment from some American investors. And it came to the section where I had to show my business plan and my profit and loss forecast. And I was terrified. I actually freaked out because I'm terrified and terrible with numbers. I can't count, interestingly enough. I might explain that to you later on, but counting is quite difficult for me, being dyslexic. And so I got stressed. I went away and I drew a graph, a bar chart, and said, in year 1, this is how much this part of the business will make, this is how much this will make, this is how much this will lose. In year 2, so on and so forth. And you could see the aggregate of this bar chart going up. My business plan was purely graphic. I won the investment. People loved it. Learning galleries. You've got pictures all over the school. And as you progress down the corridor, the pictures tell a story. And when you have this gallery, the students themselves become engaged with the gallery. They're the ones who use the pictures. They're the ones who put the pictures up, who arrange the pictures in the way they want the pictures to be arranged. This gallery is the work of art of the students themselves. Visualization prompts. I think the best way to give a visualization prompt is to play a little game with you. Normally when I play this game I use a ball, but I forgot to bring the ball, so I've got some socks. You don't need them to be washed, do you? This is called the alphabet game. What I'm going to do is I will begin the alphabet game by saying the letter A. I will then throw the sock to a lucky recipient, and you will catch the sock, shout B, and then throw it away as quickly as you can to somebody else who catches it and says C. Okay? Very, very simple stuff. Don't you look like that. Okay? Because you are hiding, we're going to start with A. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, right, so this isn't too hard. What we're now going to do, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but backwards. Okay? Oh, I know. So, we're going to start with Z, and then the person I throw it to will do the previous word in the alphabet, and then the previous word. So, Z.
I'm not a good catcher. You.
No. Okay, very bad. It's hard. It's very hard. Oh, nearly. Oh, by the way, this is really useful. It's called convergence exercise. One of the problems that people with dyslexia often have is what we call convergence. That is the eyes focusing. This practice is convergence. It's a really useful little experiment. I'm going to teach you the alphabet backwards. It's really easy. Okay, I'm dyslexic. I'm terrible at sequences. Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, D, A. It's easy. Don't patronize me. I'm going to teach you how to do this using visualization prompts. Okay, what I'd like you to do is envisage and visualize 3 letters. Z, Y, and X. Massive letters, as big as you want, made of any material, any colour you want. For me, one of them is felt. One of them's got light bulbs on it, like in the Star's dressing room. One of them's sparkly and shiny, okay? Z, Y, X. Now what I want you to do, I come from the city of York, so I think in terms of windswept Vikings. Okay, so wind going through the Vikings' hair. Okay, a windswept Viking, W, V. Okay, so you've got these first 3 letters, Z, Y, X, and then a windswept W, V, Viking. And he is in university, talking sense. Or any other S letter you happen to come up with. So we've got Z, Y, X, windswept Viking in university talking sense. WVUTS. And suddenly, through the window, any size, any colour you want, comes a really quick parrot. RQP. And it lands on Martin Luther King. MLK. So O-N-M-L-K, and it does. A jig. J-I-H-G. Okay? So this is the first half, okay? Z-Y-X, these three letters that you see. And then there is a windswept Viking in university talking sense when suddenly a really quick parrot lands on Martin Luther King and does a jig. J-I-H-G. There is a knock at the door. And somebody pushes a FedEx parcel through the door, F-E-D. And for people of my generation, you open the FedEx parcel and there's a CB radio inside it. With the letter A written on it. For anarchist. Okay? So here's the story again, these three letters, Z-Y-X. There is a windswept Viking in university talking sense. A really quick parrot comes into the window and lands on Martin Luther King. Does a little jig. There's a knock on the door. Someone pushes a FedEx parcel through the door. Inside the FedEx parcel there's a CB radio with the letter A written on it. Suddenly this becomes an awful lot easier. Anybody can remember the alphabet with visual prompts. Okay? It's really simple. Morphology. I don't know how many of you are really into morphology. I love morphology. It's how I learned to spell effectively. As a dyslexic, I found learning to spell very tricky. Morphology is great. You have the prefixes, the prefix, you have the suffix, and in the middle you have the root word. So let's take the root word, something like duct. You have duct tape, something that you wrap around pipes. You have tear ducts, that kind of thing. You add some prefixes, viaduct, aqueduct, product, induct. You add some suffixes, reduction, that kind of thing. You teach spelling through teaching morphology, and you make morphology visual and colourful. This is really good for secondary school students. Before secondary school, you're teaching phonemic awareness and phonetic awareness. When you get to secondary school age, you're teaching morphology, and this really helps students learn. And finally, constructivism. The idea that students construct their own truths. Now, without being too philosophical about this, there are some really interesting things you can do with constructivism. Here's one form of constructivism. I'm going to tell you a story. Okay? I'm going to tell you a story. This story is a story I constructed about 3 worlds. Okay? I'd like you to imagine 3 worlds. These worlds were created by a benign and omniscient creator. You'll see it in a second. The first world had very small buildings on it. These buildings weren't terribly tall, but there were lots of them, and they were all crowded together in localized areas. The second world was quite similar to the first world, but the buildings were a little bit taller, they were slightly further spaced out, and there weren't quite as many of them. And in the third world, the buildings were taller still. They were even further spaced out, and there was a few of them, but not as many of them as the other worlds. So therefore, we have 3 worlds. Now, if you want to communicate in these worlds, it's really important that we understand how they communicate. So, the first world, the person at the bottom of the staircase has the message. She runs up the staircase to the top of the staircase. It doesn't take her very long at all, because it's not a very tall building. And then she can run down again, she can run up, and she can throw the message across to the people in the next building, and it doesn't take long to throw the message across. There is a lot of communication going on really quickly. In the second world, it takes a little bit longer to get up the staircases with the message. When you're at the top of the staircase, it takes a little bit longer to throw the message from one building to the next. So there's nearly as much communication, but it's not quite as localized. It's a little bit more regionalized. And as you probably guessed, the third world takes even longer to get up the stairs. Once you're up the stairs, it takes a long time to throw the message from one building to another, and of course it's not localized and it's not regionalized, it's more globalized. Okay? It's more globalized. And this is a very good analogy for different methods of communication. You've got from the most crowded form of communication to the least crowded form of communication. You've got from the most localized to the most globalized. These are three different methods, if you like, of people communicating with each other. And we know that diverse cross-functional operations typically outperform less diverse operations by between 30 and 40%. That's not just businesses, by the way, that's education institutions, that's social institutions, that's almost everything. Okay, so that we know that by bringing these three worlds together, we can usually outperform universes that don't bring these three worlds together. This is a very good example of a cross-functional organization, because you've got communication happening all around the world. So that the benign creator of this world, who happens to look a little bit like Morgan Freeman, the benign creator of this world realizes that the best world he or she can possibly create is one that brings them all together. Now, here I am talking about dyslexia. Why am I giving you a lesson in theology? Very simple. It's actually a lesson in dyslexia awareness. Everybody's brains is made up of mush, okay? But there's an outer shell of the mush that we call the cortex. Now, in your cortex, everybody's cortex, even you, in your cortex, you have what we call mini-columns, okay? Mini-columns are stacks of cells, and these cells communicate with each other. And they're bunched together, okay? Now, to give some perspective, people with autism, people on the autism spectrum, they have tons of mini-columns. Loads and loads and loads of mini-columns, but they're quite small. And they're bunched really closely together. And what this means is they're often overloaded with sensory and cognitive input. One of the reasons they close down is because of the overload. Okay? People with dyslexia, on the other hand, they have a third world. Our mini-columns are really quite big. Mine stick up like this. This is why I've got curly hair, so you can't see them. My mini-columns stick up quite far. I don't have as many of them, and they're more globalized. And what this means is that with the dyslexic world, the autistic world, and the neurotypical world, whatever that word means, these three people think differently. We process information differently. It's why autistic people focus. And it's why dyslexic people typically see the big picture. This isn't just a metaphor. This is fact. It's based in neurology. And theology, as you can see. And what it means is those people with dyslexia tend typically to see a bigger picture and be more creative. Now, are we just saying this to be nice to dyslexic people? Dyslexic people, they don't do very well at school, but they're creative. Give them a pat in the air. Not quite. Okay, there's actually some research on this. Really interesting stuff. So this comes to the creativity. Let's have a look at the research. Does being dyslexic mean the dyslexic person is built neurologically to be more creative? Well, yes, there are studies that have found a link between dyslexia and creativity. One study showed that junior high school students who were diagnosed with dyslexia performed significantly better in a well-known psychological creativity test than their non-dyslexic counterparts. A 1979 study of the creative potential of people with dyslexia found that people with dyslexia are able to learn and remember secondary information easily, a capacity linked to creativity. Now, I mentioned primary and secondary information. Effectively, primary information is the stuff that you as teachers want people to remember, and secondary information is the stuff that I remember. Effectively, it's the stuff on the outside. Now, interestingly, when autistic people see images, they focus on the center of the image. There's a lot of research done about this. It's really interesting stuff. People with dyslexia have extremely good peripheral vision. We have very good peripheral vision. We're the opposite. And this is linked with the local focus of the mini-columns in the autistic brain and the global focus of the mini-columns in the dyslexic brain. People with autism and dyslexia think almost at opposite ends of the scale. Neurotypical people are in the middle. You can grab both of us. Have a look at another one. 20 years ago, the Central St. Martin's School of Art and Design funded research into the link between creativity and dyslexia. Dr. Beverly Stafer, we'll come back to her in a second, Dr. Beverly Stafer found 3/4 of their 360 foundation students had dyslexia. They found that there seems to be a trade-off between being able to see the world vividly and three-dimensionally and creatively on the one hand, and processing written words on the other. People with dyslexia, we may struggle with one thing, but we actually have this other ability. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not really great with written words, but I'm kind of a vivid human being. In one 1992 study, a positive relationship between creativity and interpersonal problem solving was found in dyslexic students. Higher scores in verbal fluency were associated with a better ability to analyze a problem, generate alternative solutions, and foresee the consequences to the solution that was chosen. If you're not so good at reading and writing, you speak. If you speak, you're good at problem solving, you're good at predicting the outcome. And finally, creativity in dyslexic and non-dyslexic children in France and Belgium was evaluated with something called the Torrance test of creative thinking. We'll come to this soon, it's brilliant. Children with dyslexia showed higher creativity scores than non-dyslexic participants. Importantly, it was also found that educational approaches could improve the creative scores in dyslexia even further, matching students from arts universities. School children's creativity would match the creativity of students from arts universities when it was released. So here's a very quick test. Here's a very bad drawing of a school bus, okay, that I found online. And I'm just going to ask you some very simple questions. Hands up those people who think the school bus is driving to the right. Okay? Hands up those people who think the school bus is driving to the left. Hands up those people who think you can't tell. Hands up those people who didn't put their hands up. This is great, I love this. When I first saw this, I thought, oh my god. This question was asked to preschool children in the USA. 90% responded that the bus was going to the left, but asked why, they said because you can't see the door to get on it. How do we feel stupid now? So what we're going to do, we're going to look at something called the Torrance test, okay? Now, believe it or not, you have just taken the Torrance test. Okay? The Torrance test of creative thinking comes in a number of ways. Everybody was given a slip of paper, a little bit like this. I asked you to complete the slip of paper, okay? Just show it to the person next to you. Very nice. Very nice. Now, if you're drawing, look, something simple like that, you belong to the vast majority of neurotypical people. I can hear a roll of people going, oh my god. If you're drawing a little bit more like that, on the other hand, you would score quite high on the Torrance test for creative thinking. In York, we are fortunate enough, really fortunate enough, at the moment, to have an exhibition. It's called the Van Gogh Immersive Experience. Wonderful. If you've never seen it, go and see it in York or wherever it is. I think there's one in Strasbourg at the moment as well. Really, really very cool. And I went and I liked it. And in the Van Gogh Immersive Experience, there's a colouring in section that you can take at the end. So you can colour stuff in. I love colouring, and I'm a child at heart. And I thought, what a great idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and develop the Torrance test for my neurodiverse groups. Okay, so I teach neurodiversity in SEN in York, at York Associates, and I thought, well, I'll take this idea and I'll see what we can do with it. This is a typical response from somebody who is neurotypical, who is not dyslexic. Beautiful, isn't it? Really very nice indeed. She did really, really, I mean, I'm not patronising, she did really well. It looked very much like the kind of thing Van Gogh came out with. Van Gogh, by the way, who was also dyslexic. This is what one of my dyslexic students came out with. Got eyes, teeth, a nose, hair, some sort of eyes coming out the side of his head. I think there's a Cheshire cat's tail up there, or something like that. It's absolute madness. Either this person is really creative or incredibly stoned. I'm not sure. absolutely beautiful. The reason this is important is there was a report published this October, last month, consultancy firm EY used data from the World Economic Forum to outline how dyslexic people's skills align with the skills that will be required in the workplaces of the future. Referencing the World Economic Forum's prediction of which skills will be the most in demand by 2022, EY's report highlighted how certain capabilities were becoming more and less useful to employees or employers with the rise of automation. The need for processing and manual capabilities like time management, reading and maths were on the decline according to the report. Meanwhile, the report's authors highlighted the capabilities and skills typically seen in people with dyslexia, as we've seen, that would be vital to all industries by the year 2022. They included leadership, social influence, creativity, initiative and idea generation. Jobs in the workplace that dyslexic individuals may typically find challenging will largely be impacted by forms of automation, the report's authors said. Fascinating stuff. And we know that creativity and visualization are intimately linked. As Aristotle said, there can be no words without images. We know this. And in fact, I've used a really interesting example here. After the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers in 2001, the city fathers and city mothers used mind mapping to recreate Lower Manhattan, because these mind maps took really complex information and simplified it, and everybody could understand it. This idea of creativity. In fact, it was so successful that the mind map that they used is now on show at the Museum of Modern Art as an exhibit of cultural significance. It's really, really interesting. And in fact, these are things where creativity and visualization intersect. People who are visual can see patterns and connections. I personally, and this isn't a boast, it's just who I am, I can see where arguments dissect. So when I'm discussing something with people, when I'm arguing or debating with people, I can park that one thing there and go down that argument and then come back to the intersection and then go back down that road. This is how I see the world. I can see connections and disjunctions. We can envision new possibilities. We can explain things clearly. I mean, I hope you understood the idea of the mini-columns in the brains, using the three worlds analogy. We can see problems, we can highlight important points, and we can paint a picture of the future. Some of us can. The problem is, there is a crisis in creativity, a big, big crisis in creativity. We're just going to look at this for 2 seconds. It's really important. I don't know how many of you know this, probably a lot of you, but a few years ago, there was a longitudinal study. That is a study that takes a long period of time. What researchers did is they tested preschool children, 5 years old, on how creative they were. And there is a test that they used, and that if children scored above a certain level, they were considered creative geniuses. Okay? Now, I'm just going to ask you, of all these preschool children, these 5-year-old children, I don't know how many of you know, but if you don't know, just take a guess. What percentage of 5-year-old children scored at genius level or above? 90%? 10%? 80%? 70%? Okay, right, I'm not going to tell you yet. Okay, they then tested these same children 5 years later. What percentage came out of genius level? 30%, 10%, 2%. Which children do you know? Then they tested them again 5 years later at age 15. How many came out of genius level? 20%, 3%? Okay, right. This is the result of the study. This is shocking. Age 5, 98% of children scored at genius level or above. By age 10, 30% of children scored at genius level or above. By age 15, it had more than halved again to 12% of children scoring at genius level or above. But they got really depressed about this, so they stopped doing it. But another consultancy company, another research company continued, and into adulthood, 2% scored at genius level or above. We had inverted the genius ratio of the human race. And interestingly, between 5 and adulthood, what had happened to them? Education. right answer, there's the wrong answer, yeah? Yeah? We all know what we do to kids. There's the right answer, you got that wrong, whack! At least in high school they did that anyway. And it's really important. A guy called Kyung-hee Kim talked about the creativity crisis. He said, I analysed data from the famous Torrance test since it was originally from 1966 up to 2008. The sample size is almost 300,000. Up to 1990, creativity was going up. And then after that, and somewhere between 1990 and 1998, something happened and it started to decline. In 1998, it declined. And then again in 2008, it declined. Probably in 2018, it declined. It's been declining constantly. Something has happened. And I can tell you what's happened, by the way. I can tell you what's happened. There's somebody who spent a long, long time in education, from the mid-1970s to the early 2000s, dropping out and going back in again. Somebody who spent a long time in university. I can tell you exactly what happened in Britain, at least, in the 1990s. Education became commoditized. Standardized testing increased. Schools and universities started competing against each other based on scores that they were getting from tests from children. So children became effectively production lines for results for the schools. This crushes creativity, absolutely kills creativity, because there's no room for getting it wrong. And if you can't get it wrong, how can you be creative? And yet, a recent IBM poll of 1,500 CEOs identified creativity as the #1 leadership competency of the future. Creativity, which is hardwired into the brain of people with dyslexia. It's not that other people aren't creative. We're all creative if we're allowed to be creative. But this is a moral crime, because people with dyslexia are creative inherently. That's how their brains are built. You're not just stopping them from doing things, you're stopping them from being who they are. Dr. Beverly Schaefer, again, child psychologist and neuropsychologist, associate fellow of the British Psychological Society, has shown that dyslexic children or dyslexic people mentally model concepts. It's all very visual, they perceive patterns, they have a multi-dimensional perspective. And this means they can conceive and build models, solve complex puzzles, and imagine, structure, and create. How does this fit into the teaching environment? Well, I like to talk about beehives and honeycombs. It's a really interesting little concept. This might get quite annoying after a while, I don't know. Traditional teaching methods concentrate on honeycombs. That is elements of knowledge, elements of information. Today, I'm going to tell you this. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you this. The day after, I'm going to tell you this. Remember it. Oh, it's all disappeared. Okay? People with dyslexia, we have what we call working memory issues. Short-term working memory problems. If you just expect us to remember pieces of information, we'll probably fail. We will probably fail. Okay, so if you just give us lots and lots of honeycombs, those honeycombs will disappear after a remarkably short period of time. If, on the other hand, you give us the beehive, you give us the structure, the overall view, the holistic view, we'll see the honeycombs inside it. Don't you worry about that. If you give us the structure, we'll understand what goes into it. If you just give us the honeycombs, nothing is clear. Nothing is clear at all. And as you can see, this leads to the third of the three keys, structures. How does this play out? I don't know if anybody went to lecture 2, the one on learning styles. Really interesting lecture, I really enjoyed that. But somebody in this learning styles lecture mentioned, you can't put English onto one sheet of paper. You can't put English grammar onto one sheet of paper. Well, I beg to differ. I was working with a guy from Switzerland about 4 years ago. He's dyslexic. He had been trying to learn English for most of his childhood and adult life, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't understand how English fits together. He just didn't get it. It was like someone was just giving him honeycomb after honeycomb after honeycomb and expecting him to build up a beehive with them. He didn't understand how they all fitted together. And I remember he said to me once, he said, "Martin, I just don't get it. What on earth does English grammar look like?" Wonderfully dyslexic question. What does English grammar look like? So we spent half a day and we drew it. Here is my drawing of English grammar. Brilliant, isn't it? Now you can all speak English. For anybody who's a fan of early 1980s music, this is basically the Cool for Cats album cover. I don't know if anyone's seen that. Okay, right. This is the whole of English grammar. And then what we did is we put into that the past, the present, and the future. Fairly simple. Okay? So we've got the whole of it, and we've got past, present, and future. And where the triangle touches the edges of the circle, we have the simple, the perfect, and the continuous. Suddenly we start to see how it fits together. Now, if we know what the perfect does, talks about the past with no reference from a standpoint. Something like that. And if we know how to construct it, subject plus have plus the past participle, then we think, alright, let's take the present perfect. Let's turn this triangle inside the circle to look at the present perfect. I have spoken. Something like that. I have eaten. I have been to Australia. If we know what the continuous does, kind of talked about temporary events, short-term actions, that kind of thing, and we know how to construct it, the verb to be plus ing, well, okay, let's point the continuous, turn the circle this way, point the continuous to the present. I am speaking, I am eating. Let's turn the continuous to the past, I was eating. Let's turn to the future, I will be eating. The perfect, present perfect, I have been eating, so I have eaten. Past perfect, I had eaten. Future perfect, I would have eaten. You can see how it kind of works. You can, if you want, turn it like this. So the perfect and the continuous are both pointing at the present, I have been eating. Turn it to the past, I had been eating. Turn it to the future, etc., etc., etc. It's not that hard. Now, it might not speak to you, but this guy looked at me. And he looked at this. And he had one of these St. Paul on the road to Damascus moments, when suddenly I could see how English fits together. And he came to love English. We started discussing it like nothing else. He absolutely loves it now. For once, you can see the structures of English. And that's all you're doing with people. This is what visual learning is about. You're seeing the structures, you're being creative, and you're using visualization. All right. Let's come to another example. One of my favorite examples. Most of you are teachers or educators, I'm guessing. So most of you, even if you don't use it, most of you will have heard of something called Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? Faces, oh God. Like wax in a hot room or something like that. Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, right. Let me explain Bloom's taxonomy very, very quickly indeed. I've screenshot this from Wikipedia. If you can learn that, okay, that's Bloom's taxonomy. Easy, isn't it? Okay, right. Well, what if we did this? How much easier is that? You can see the hierarchy, you can see the primary, secondary, tertiary. You can see how it fits together. It's using structures, it's colourful, and it's simple. But what if you don't like hierarchies? What if you don't like the hots and the lots, the higher order and the lower order thinking strategies? What if you don't like them? Well, you could redesign it, be constructivist, to look like that. Suddenly, it's not a pyramid anymore. Well, okay, it's got 4 different categories, and it's got 6 things that fit inside those categories. It might be okay, but it might be a bit too simplistic for you, so redesign it to look like that. Remembering and understanding go together, evaluating, analysing, and creating those together, and holding them together is the application. And you can see directionality arrows. As we mentioned earlier, the directionality of thought, epistemic directionality, ontological directionality. Well, okay. mind maps. Now, let's brush on from mind maps to this. Now, you can make this work. You can make this work. Let's take remembering. Remembering, you can have, for instance, bookmarking, listening, recalling. You can turn it. You can turn the remembering wheel around the creating wheel. You can join them together. How wonderful is that? How interactive is that? How overall viewing is that? You can see the structure, you can see how it works together, and people can explore how it works together. And if they're kind of kinesthetic people, they can build it. You can build it using cardboard. And then you can throw it and, I don't know, use it as dice or something on those. My favourite, by the way, my absolute favourite, is the periodic table of Bloomfield. Personally, I wouldn't use it. I just think it looks beautiful. That's all. Yeah, it's beautiful. So what we're showing is that you can redesign it, you can reconstruct it, you can be structural, visual, and creative with it. And when people do that, this is what deep learning is. They're not just remembering it. This is deep learning. And as they do this, they're using everything Bloom's taxonomy wants them to use. Anyone can do this. But dyslexic people need to do this. And I can hear you all saying, oh, yeah. But look, they all go together. Visualization, creativity, and structure, they all go together. There is no separation between the three. As we've seen, visualization gives creativity. Creativity gives structuring. Structuring is a visual thing. They go together. And if anyone here is wondering how hard it's going to be to change what we do to make our teaching more dyslexic friendly, well, first of all, we remember there's almost nothing that we've shown here that non-dyslexic people can do. In fact, there's nothing that non-dyslexic people would struggle with. Nothing at all. Will it cost anything, though? This is the good bit. This is the really good bit, and then we'll finish, okay? The UNESCO Institute of Statistics finds that countries will need an extra 3.3 million teachers to achieve universal primary education by 2030. Base statistic. 3.3 million extra teachers to achieve universal primary education. Let's just ask, how much not understanding dyslexia costs us as countries? Now, I'm afraid the Czech Republic isn't on here, but you'll be able to work it out. The US loses $300 billion a year through not understanding dyslexia. In terms of things like mental health problems, dyslexic people are about 50% more likely to attempt suicide. They're about 85% more likely to attempt some form of self-harm. In terms of things like extra help at school, in terms of dropping out of school early, in terms of unemployment benefits, in terms of lowered tax receipts, this is what dyslexia costs in the US. And it goes down into Australia, which doesn't have as many people. It costs them about $18.5 billion a year. Britain isn't on here. I can tell you from the statistic I read about 15 years ago, this is 15 years ago, Britain loses something like 15 to 15.5 billion pounds a year through not understanding dyslexia properly. Pounds. That's more than $18.5 billion. It's like $20, $21 billion. Something like that. We're losing a lot of money. Why are we losing a lot of money? Well, did you know 70 to 80% of people with poor reading skills are probably dyslexic? If you have poor readers in your class, you have to start thinking about dyslexia. You have to start thinking about visual, structural, creative ways of learning. Because if you don't, we're causing them to drop out. We're causing them social anxiety. We're causing them mental health problems. We're causing our schools to lose results, by the way, if you want to be practical about it. We also know that 62% of non-readers drop out of high school. I did. And then I went back, and I dropped out again, and I went back. Because I'm just really, really keen. In Britain, the cost, not the cost of dyslexia, but the cost of unrecognised dyslexia to the UK alone is around £1 billion every year. Unrecognised dyslexia. And what's happening is, when we say unrecognised dyslexia, what we mean is we're teaching people without taking dyslexia into account, and those people we don't realise are dyslexic are falling behind in the classrooms, and they're not getting the jobs they need to get. The cost to the British taxpayer of unrecognised dyslexia is about £1 billion a year. Well, you might ask, £7 billion buy you? Let's have a look. 147,000 state pensions a year. 2.3 million people's disability living allowance. 12,000 hospital doctors every year. If anyone knows any nurses, 26,000 nurses. 22,000 secondary school teachers. This one is the start of the school year, this one's at the end of the school year. Or you could say this one's at the start of the Monday and that one's at the end of the Monday. I don't really know. And 27,000 primary school teachers every year. 27,000 primary school teachers every year just by understanding dyslexia better. And if we remember, by 2030 we need an extra 3.3 million teachers globally. The figures are astronomical. If all we do is understand the learning potential of people with dyslexia, we can do this. It's not just about helping dyslexics. It's not just about improving our own results. It's about changing education forever. Just by understanding dyslexia and visual learning. Think about what you can do. Thank you very much.